Hi guys, welcome to episode 2 of my channel, Metagaming. Well, it's actually Dank's production, but our segment that we're going to be discussing over a couple episodes will be discussed about the competitive aspects of metagaming. But you're probably wondering if you're a starting player or if you're a veteran player, you probably already understand this, or this is something that you already grasped, I guess, is that when you're playing card games, basically, when somebody says about that card is pretty bad for the meta, oh that card is pretty good for the meta, or that card is absolutely broken, it'll totally ruin the meta. They mean to say that it's what metagaming is exactly is that certain times, like a certain card could just drive the whole direction of how everybody plays cards into such a direction that it changes how decks are made, how side decks are formulated, how main decks are formulated also, because there's usually certain situations where there's a certain deck that usually does pretty well, but then a card comes out as support for it, and it just totally makes a deck tier 1 or tier 0. Tiers, if for the people that don't get it, tiers are the level of a deck that is within a card game format. There's oftentimes is discussed as tier 3 to tier 0, but then there's like the subpar tiers, like you can jokingly say like from like 4 or lower and all that type of stuff, but it's not really discussed in that sense. It's usually that tier 3 decks are pretty average based decks that can win certain games, can win certain tournaments, can be pretty consistent if they go off, and pretty hard to stop when they're on the ball. But then compared to tier 2 or tier 1 or tier 0 even, they're still pretty underneath them. And then there's the tier 2, which is then above, just above average, pretty good. It can win, it can top some tournaments, it can do pretty well, but then it's not like tier 1, which is godlike, which is consistent enough to just constantly top tournaments, win YTSs, or win Pro Tours in Magic, or win like regionals or nationals in all three the basic card games. And that's how tier 1s are, and tier 0s are, you don't really hear too much of them. They are very rare. They're just basically, from what I saw so far, like every 4 years or something, that there's like a tier 0 deck. Like with Yugi, there was Chaos Emperor Dragon Yaturesu, and then there was Dragon Rulers with the babies and stuff, and when Judgment Day came out for spellbooks, those were the tier 0 decks. And then for Magic the Gathering, it's a little different for them. How, I don't quite know if there is like a tier 3 to 1 or tier 0 for them, but I know that there is a high tier, low tier of deck where there's aggro decks tend to be maybe around the ballpark of tier 3, depending on what type of aggro deck it is. And then there is control decks and then burn decks that also fall into pretty okay categories, and then there's the mid-range decks that also has their own category, their own tiers, and they have their own way of going about in their own respective games. So then every metagame is different for every card game, and then don't forget that for every card game there's also the OCG, and then there's a TCG for it. So there's the original card game and the trading card game. And the original card game is usually around Central Asia, Japan, and most of those regions. And then for the TCG, that is the Western. And TCG and the OCG usually get their own specific cards, or sometimes the OCG gets cards before us, or they get their region-specific cards that work for their format. And then we just don't. Or we just get ours a little later, so then it doesn't impact our format the same as theirs would. So there's oftentimes where certain card games would look to the OCG lists, but then they'd see, well, okay, the ban list over there is pretty different than it is for us, because of how cards can impact the metagame. And that's one of the things that I hope that you guys was able to find insightful in this episode. But thanks for watching. If any of you guys have any discussion things that you want to put up, or any information that you want to find out for playing card games or whatever, or what have you, you can just leave it in the description below. Be awesome, stay awesome, and have a wonderful day.